Welcome to the Smarter Leadership Podcast, where we explore the power of leadership, from overcoming challenges to shaping cultures and building a lasting legacy. Through inspiring stories and insights from our guests, we'll share transformative lessons to help you thrive in today's interconnected world. I'm Tucci. Join us for conversations that will inspire thought and action. Bernard Avle is a distinguished Ghanaian journalist and broadcaster, serving as the general manager of City FM and Channel 1 TV. Known for his sharp analysis and compelling storytelling, he hosts the acclaimed City Breakfast Show and Point of View, tackling governance, business, and social issues. His exceptional work has earned him several awards, including Journalist of the Year at the Ghana Journalists Association Awards and Best Radio Personality at the Radio and Television Personality Awards, solidifying his position as a leading voice in Ghanaian media. So Bernard, a lot of people know you in Ghana. They know where you are today. They know you as a popular personality in media, somebody who is bold, who speaks the truth, who is investigative, who explores issues and tries to go into depth. But that's very one-sided. I want to spend a bit of time getting to know the you were before you became the you that people today talk about. So maybe you can share some moments that have defined you in life, that have maybe brought you here today, that have maybe shaped the values that you have, and how that's brought to bear today in the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. And thank you for the nice things you said. So I will give you maybe 2 or 3 key inflection points. So I was born in a family of 8.
Wow.
And I'm the 7th of 8 children. Wasn't the smartest. So always needed to prove myself by talking. Wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Okay. So I stumbled into journalism. So I think the first main inflection point was secondary into university, because I had wanted to leave the country to go study abroad, but it didn't work out. So when I got to Legon to study in the year 2000, my plan was to be an economist. And so that was the focus, and sort of got into radio by accident. And sort of liked it and realized I was pretty good at it. So when I was about to leave the university, there was an opportunity to start as a national service person for a new radio station.
Which station is
City
that?
FM.
City. Oh,
so
you went.
City started test transmission July 2004, and by November we officially took off.
Nice.
So I was.
You joined them at national service. Okay.
Yes, because that wasn't my ambition, but it sort of worked out. So I would say the transitioning from somebody who wanted to become an economist, of course I did do my economics first degree, and then entering media as a national service person was a key one. And then of course growing into leadership in 2 ways, not just as a journalist, but now leading, becoming like a voice on air, and then now leading people, because I went to do my MBA in the UK 2008.
I read about that. You were at Warwick Business School. So was I. Something we have in common already.
We'll talk about that.
Yes.
So that was the second, because when you start journalism, you want to be popular, you want to be credible, you want to be known, but then leading people is a whole new ball game. But that was interesting, because now the perspective I have on discussions, because leading is difficult, talking is easy, but now coming on air, being a manager, understanding issues from the operational perspective, it makes you more solid. So I would say Warwick, coming back into operations management in the company, but still being on air, was the second one. And of course, the third one would be more like personal tragedy, which sort of, it was unexpected, but it also helped me redefine my values and really decide what I wanted to do. So I would say secondary into uni, few years at City into Warwick and coming back, and then personal tragedy a couple of years ago. So I think the key values would be modesty, determination, love for country. It's very important, love for country, and speaking truth to power fearlessly.
And would you say that all those 4 values run through all of those periods, those, what you call inflection moments or turning points in your life, or did some of them grow more from 1 or 2 of those moments?
I suppose the experiences you go through, depending on how you respond to them, help you form or get convinced of what you truly believe. So tragedy is very important to know what your priorities are in life. It brings a certain level of clarity. And pain always has a purpose, right? If you use it properly, tells you some things are out of course. So, for example, the way I treat family now and the way I focus on certain things, I think tragedy made that very, very clear. The issue of leadership, because leadership is in 2 ways, okay? So a lot of people think being a public figure means you're a leader, but that's not what leadership is. Really developing people by leading yourself and being a good example. And the tension between demanding from duty bearers what they ought to do, asking difficult questions, but also being humbled by my own failures in trying to change my team or try to move them along or try to get them to be as passionate as I am. Or trying to let them understand that we are in a different season and therefore things have to change. And they are misunderstanding me. I wouldn't say it softens you, but it makes you think more deeply about how you approach duty bearers. Because now you know that change is difficult. Yeah. It also makes you, in a sense, it also makes you harder because they have to lead by example. Yeah. Because prior to that period, you could say anything. So now when somebody just comes to sit on my show and just says anything, I'm like, no, what you're doing is louder than what you're saying. Yeah. So we look at track records. So it was a very important transition for me, leading whilst also learning. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
On the one hand, it's like you're independent. When you're speaking, it's just you. But when you have to lead people, you have to work with people, or you can only get the results actually from people, it becomes a whole new ball game, and your independence in a sense is gone. Control is out of your hands. You literally lose control. You can regain it in some senses by how you learn how to manage people or how to develop people, but it's like you're relying on other than yourself,
But that's growth, actually.
It's growth.
Because the way you put it is nice, because you're stretching yourself. And I can say it's grown me in 2 ways. I'm more deliberate. I think more about what I say. Because think about this. You're on air from 6:20 in the morning to 10 a.m. And there's a rule in radio. There's no need for silence.
That's tough.
So think about that.
Yes.
And you're not talking like, I'm relaxed here. You're talking at pace. So there's a tendency to just do word salads, right? But when you think about your situation, you think about the nation, you think about your responsibility, you're forced to be very clear. Yeah. Forces clarity from you. And you also know that you can't say anything, because by your words you'll be condemned, by your words you would be acquitted. Yeah. And there are days I listen to my show and I'm like, wow, did I actually say this? All right. And what makes this funny is that even though I'm more deliberate about what I say, I think the past 4 years or so, I've become very impatient with bad leadership. So I do a lot of what they call monologues, right, or editorials. Okay. So in the past, I would just interview people or just provide information. But now I take definite positions. Right. So I remember when...
How long has that been?
Probably from 2015-ish, 2016-ish. Okay. So I went to work 2000 and I came back 2009. I think my show people started taking my show more seriously 2011, 2012-ish. By 2014, we're definitely in the top 2. By 2015, 2016, obviously many people's favorite. 2017 was probably my best year. And then we got the award, Journalist of the 2018. All right, so I can say, and I remember when Achimota School said they were not going to admit Tyrone Magai. And I did...
The dreadlocks.
Yes. I did an editorial which was historical. I researched and I took a position which I believe was one of the casting votes because Achimota buckled because it was a very powerful argument that A.G. Fraser wrote to Ifemamu and said, you've been kicked out of the Presbyterian College because you've decided to innovate. The Atetebeng, the cloth, this is the kind of leader we need. And I said, Achimota, if you know your history, you can't look at Ifemamu and that letter Fraser wrote and look at Taramaga and say, I'm going to admit you. That was a new type of journalism where you research and you take a position. And I guess a lot of people feel journalists are just supposed to report. I don't believe that. Because we are privileged, we have access to information, we must stand up for truth. And we must be courageous. And we must have the courage not to be liked. Yeah. Because I think a lot of journalists in the era of likes and clicks and follows, you have to get to a point where I can discuss a topic which is not very popular, very difficult, but not because I want 100,000 likes, because the salience of a point is not validated by how many people click it, how it lasts and how it's proved to be true. So I guess that's one way this past few years has grown me.
Okay, so that's speaking truth to power. I mean, it comes alive, you know, and it's grown over the years. In fact, as you've been developing yourself, growing as a leader, going through life and some of the challenges, you know, it's made you that much more determined. And maybe I'll go back to the first value you mentioned. I think it was modesty. And, you know, the comment you just made about, you know, not doing things for the ticks, for the likes, for the hearts, but, you know, the value that you have about speaking truth really overrides all of that, and it kind of complements and it makes sense, you know. So probably those values you've been carrying them along with you, but they're strengthening and they're manifesting in your experiences, and so that's nice to hear. Especially,
of course, it wasn't always like this, because when you start out in media, you want follows. You want to be read if you're writing, you want to be heard if you're talking, you want to be viewed if you're doing TV.
Because if you're not, then who's going to hear the story?
Exactly. So I'm not saying that there's no commercial sense in which we work, but I also believe that the people who listen, who want good stuff, are more than those who want surface stuff.
Really?
It's just that we've not explored it. Why is my show the best?
I mean, it's a good question, because
I've disproved
in my life, I feel that here, it feels like it's the opposite.
I challenge that. I challenge that because we built a show that's become, at least in the mornings, for at least the first couple of hours, a lot of middle-class families listen to the show. I mean, everywhere I go. And it's very clear that we've gotten there because we've taken a certain position on issues that the reasonable Ghanaian likes. So I reject the idea that, the truth is that there are different demographics, all right? And there are people who want just certain kinds of programs, all right? But I think influential media doesn't necessarily aim for everybody.
That's true.
Number two, even with the mass market, when people start thinking about the environment, the roads, healthcare, education, they want a show that's not necessarily apolitical, but is objective.
And that's what I was about to say. I think maybe because you've hit at the hard, the big topics, you know, that touch everyone across the strata of the population. So it's not so much necessarily. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm saying this as a regular person, as a citizen, and not as someone in the media. But, you know, I get the impression that people like sensationalism, but when it comes to the news you've been reporting, they've literally been topics that kind of touch people at every level. It's like social issues, it's big issues. So there is relevance, and they can relate. But if it's an obscure topic, but you're, you know, digging for the truth and you're telling the story, I'm not sure that you're average person.
So let me pick on something. I like the word relevance, because in the first 7 years, we said refreshing radio. Then we said now relevant radio. So we've sort of evolved from being a refreshing breath of fresh air into relevant radio always. So you nailed it there. But I'll say that what makes us different is in three ways. What we choose to discuss, which has to be relevant. So one of the things journalists need to do is to make the significant interesting.
Okay.
So there are many principles of journalism. One of the principles I live by is something doesn't the fact that it's important doesn't mean people will listen. You have to make it interesting. So you need to be a good storyteller. So we make the significant interesting.
Okay.
All right. We are not just reproducers of scripts. We tell stories. All right. So it's what we discuss. Number two, how we discuss it, and then who we choose to discuss it with. So generally, the airwaves have been hogged by political actors. So whether you're discussing traffic at the Flower Pot
serial
roundabout
callers and
or
all
the
sorts.
dry patch in the north, they bring in the two leading parties to talk. I reject that from the onset. It forced us to create a big team. So my show is a conversation among friends as the main team, very much like an American show.
Okay.
So, and I've had, come to think of it, 4 groups I've worked with. And I'm the only person, I'm the only person who's been constant on the show for the 2 decades. But the show doesn't feel stale. So what we choose to discuss has to be relevant to people. How we discuss has to be objective and factual and informative. So there's a research desk, you bring perspective.
Okay.
Then you have to use voices that are truly independent, not talking heads. All right. So I guess if you do it that way, you will even lure a lot of the mass market who people think are just in for the fun. No, there are people. I have people who are artisans. They're in a trotro from Kasua, and they're listening to the show. I'm discussing lack of street lights, talking about educational system, talking about healthcare and customer service. They're very interested in these topics, right? So I guess we've learned on the job and found a space that we've guarded well. You're a marketer, you understand this better than I do.
Absolutely do.
Yeah.
But do you ever feel that, as a group, you've been pressured because you want to come across as so objective and so, apolitical and so on, that sometimes you may actually not give the stories or the evidence enough of a chance? Does my question make sense?
Yes. So 2 things. We've not been apolitical. We've been non-partisan.
Okay.
We're very political because important issues like education, health, mobility are very political. So we are very political, but we are not partisan. That's number 1. Number 2, the way we go about the reports, I know what you're saying, that sometimes we exclude, because you see, balance is not having, let me put it this way, we have over 300 radio stations in Ghana. Balance is not everybody having NDC, MPP in equal measure. Balance means that when you take 10, there are some who focus on MPP, some focus on NDC, some who are independent. That's balance. So it's balance within the population. Do you get it? So we are independent. There are stations that are pro this or pro that. As a whole, if you take the top 10 radio stations, all voices are heard. We feel independents are not heard enough.
Okay.
Academics are not heard enough. We also do interview politicians. In fact, some of my best interviews have been politicians. Because when duty bearers or people who promise or want to hold political power appear before you, you have to subject them to very strict proof. So some of my most viewed programs have been interviews with political figures.
Has it ever been difficult? I mean, if let's say a political figure comes and you truly admire this figure and what they represent and what they're trying to do, the policies they tout, in the spirit of trying to remain objective and appearing objective, do you give them less of a chance?
Very good question.
I've seen interviews, not here in Ghana, but where, the interviewee is almost attacked just so that the journalist or the media house doesn't appear to be a supporter.
I get that.
Where you go too far because you're trying to appear. Do you ever have those
that's a great
struggles?
question. I think I've evolved because when you're fresh, probably my first 6 years, I needed to prove that we were fearless. So I think there were times we went out of our way to just be difficult. But if you're a country that's less than 100 years old, the media has a dual role. You're not just the watchdog, but you're also the scorekeeper, and you're also building society. So part of your job is to say, yes, you guys promised that you need to do it, but part of your job also means that when something good is happening, you need to support it. So, for example, Henry Quartey, Minister for, at the time, Interior, who became Regional Minister. We thought his approach to making Accra work was great. So we openly said we support that idea. That doesn't mean I'm supporting MPP. Most reasonable people thought he was doing a great job. So my evolution has been, we are not here to just argue with beauty bearers and make them look bad. We are looking for truth, but also building a nation. Look, kids aged between 8 and 15 on their way to school listen to us. So it's not just politics. They also need to know what it means to be Ghanaian. They need to understand part of our history. They need to appreciate good Ghanaian music. They need to understand what's good about our food. So we're working both ways. One way, we're holding duty bearers accountable, but we're also bringing along people to say, that's what unites us as Ghanaians. And if there's something that this leader is doing that's great, we can, because we're not the UK. All right, their media is in a different stage. Neither are we the US. Our media, for example, we no longer do civics. And because so many people consume media, the media becomes a place for education and conscientizing people.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that role, that there'll be some interviews that are just meant to help people get what government is trying to do.
Okay.
All right? We can't be cynical and say all politicians are bad and therefore every government, and both political parties will admit that when it comes to difficult issues that require public understanding, we use a different approach.
Right.
Because, for example, we'd have no interest in banks getting a run. When there's uncertainty in the market and people want to panic withdraw, and you're in a better position to understand what the issues are, you need to do explainers. You have a responsibility
to the citizenry. Yeah,
exactly. You can't just say whatever will happen will happen. No, you can't do that. That's not being responsible. Yes.
So one thing I have to ask, because I've realized now that every time I'm speaking with someone in the media, I ask this. I am clearly passionate about it, and maybe it's to do with where I grew up. I grew up in the UK, and really from my very early years, I was a baby. So what I heard about Africa was what the international media would report.
Yes.
So it was about famine in Ethiopia. It was never anything positive. And I remember it so clearly. I was like, so this poor torn continent. I used to cry as a child. I have a lot of compassion. I would cry when I'd hear stories about starving children, and I'd put all my pocket money together to send it towards feeding efforts in Ethiopia and all sorts of things. We never heard anything positive. Fast forward, I don't know how many, decades later, I decided to come to Ghana on holiday and ended up staying here far longer than I'd planned. It was definitely no longer a holiday, and I've actually been here more than 2 decades now. And there's really not much improvement. The media is full of negative news. There's nothing ever positive spoken. And I find it difficult because positive things are happening in Africa. Why are those stories not coming out locally, let alone Africa and different countries, Ghana being portrayed positively outside? In some cases, yes. I've lived in other countries, I've worked in other countries, and when people you tell people you're from Ghana, at least now they've heard of the country. That's already a start. I think when I was growing up, people, Guyana, they hadn't even heard of Ghana. But thanks to things like football,
yes.
I was in Indonesia. I moved there for work, and they'd say, where are you from? Ghana. SEN.
Yes.
So thank you, SEN. We've got things like this are helping to put Ghana on the map, and the last more than a decade now, all the development and so on is shining a positive light, but not enough. I don't think enough positive stories are being told locally to allow those stories to also travel outside. Why is that?
I need to answer the question in 2 parts. Part of the reason why the media's coverage of Africa is negative is because of media ownership. So we don't have enough strong African media with the financial muscle and the technical skill to tell. It takes money to tell good stories at a level that can be internationally consumed. So if you take Nigeria, for example, now there's Arise News. There used to be Channels Television. You can tell that there's a lot of investment. To run even the kind of thing you're doing consistently every day is going to be very expensive. I don't think the African elite in the private sector actually believe and understand the power of media to build a continent. In this country, most people own media as an extension of their political kingdom, to buy influence and to use it to attack their favorite enemy. Now, you can't tell any kind of story with that. So some of this is economics and the structure of the media. I'm not making excuses, but that's the truth. To send Larry Maduro to Accra to tell a story about Galamsey, look, it costs money.
And even that, just sending him to come and tell a
story that
negative or a sad story, not
now,
a positive.
The response to, and the can't. So if you go to a typical big bank in Ghana or you go to the airport, they'll be watching that. Maybe some would watch Joy News, some would watch Channel 1, some would watch TV3, but most of our elite frame of reference is global. They don't want to watch local media. That's the beginning. And because of that, they don't also invest in local media. Nobody's going to tell your story for you. And the media's growth is proportionate to the private sector's growth. So it's an investment problem and a quality problem. Look, I had a first class in economics. I decided to do media. Most people thought I was crazy because the path for first class in economics at Legon, you take either a test to work in the big bank or one of the FMCGs, or at the least, you become a teaching assistant and do your PhD. I went to become a producer and a broadcast journalist in a news house. All right? So people, and I have an MBA from Warwick, and I'm still on air talking. Most people think, why are you doing this? But you see, societies that we admire, their best are on air. All right? I was reading about a newspaper editor in Switzerland who left his job as a university dean to write for a newspaper because the society values knowledge. Media is. So my point is, to even get to this negative, let's even deal with who is working in media. What's their capacity? How do we conceptualize media? We see media as, oh, you can joke, oh, you are funny, you can talk. We're not looking for depth. We're not looking for... Then even on the entertainment side, storytelling. So what Tyler Perry does for the black community in the US, with the way he makes them laugh at themselves, but makes them think deeply. Lots of skill, lots of investment. The ecosystem is big. We don't have that here. Maybe Shirley, Sparrow Production is doing some of this. Juliet Asante trying with the movie thing. So all of that needs to work. Then in terms of, we don't tell enough positive stories. I can speak for myself. We do. I'll give you a couple of examples. Every March, we get up to 150 people on buses, drive around Ghana. We call it the Heritage Caravan.
Okay.
And we show them the best of Ghana. And that's not all. That whole month, we're telling Ghanaian history, Ghanaian food, Ghanaian music. We do that for a month at our own expense. Every June, we do business. We call it Business Festival, showcasing Ghanaian businesses, showcasing what they can do. Then we do something called This is Ghana.
Right.
A big exhibition, hundreds of exhibitors showing the best of Ghana.
I've seen that one.
So the truth is, we need more of those kinds of programs to convince private sector to even support that.
We do.
It's not easy. So my point is, people don't set out to just say, let me tell a bad story about Ghana. You need to be deliberate about telling a good story. You need to be equipped to do it, and it needs to be sustainable. You need to make a business case for it. So it's not enough to say I have a good story. You need to convince someone who has money and wants to reach audiences that this. We even started doing our own, we call it mini series. Costs a lot of money to do, right? So a lot of stations will simply go and buy telenovelas from Brazil, buy Indian, and then put 3 voiceovers.
Yes. I even did a voiceover for a telenovela some years ago. And here in Ghana, it was so much fun. It was was it a Brazilian?
Shame on you.
It was called Quando Se Asmia. I don't know. I was the voice of Paloma.
Shame on
and
you.
Paloma was so popular. No, and honestly, I'd go around Ghana everywhere, and I would, I'd go to. I remember the first time I went to Koala. I said, "How much is this, please?" And the lady at the till said, Paloma! And then she called all the friends, all the colleagues. They all came. It was Paloma. They knew my voice.
But you know the thing,
I was
Tucci,
I was a Brazilian lady on TV, but they knew that's how deep.
But you know the thing though, my problem with that is I have nothing against Brazilians or Chinese or whatever. The point is, You're entertaining people. But your real objective is want to enlighten them. So they laugh, but they learn. Now, if it was a Ghanaian or Nigerian that they were watching, then we can look at ourselves and think deeply about our reality. But cuando se asma, whatever it is, this guy is a Brazilian guy. There's no way. So you can't build a citizen who loves their country, who respects what it means to be Ghanaian, if you keep showing them Japanese, Chinese, Brazilian, or Mexican soaps.
Yeah.
So the real work of the media is to enlighten through entertainment.
And I'm glad you brought up, Sparrow Productions and Shirley from
They are
Kongman,
doing
so
well
Julieta
with-
Santi, because it's all of these things.
Yeah.
We need at least one person to start
Yeah.
it, another one will do
Yeah.
it, and it's a whole ecosystem. So yes, you're right. It's not just broadcast journalism or
Yeah.
news. It's
So
it's,
what I'm
it's
saying is the
across.
positive story we want to tell, we must invest. There was a big film thing they did a few weeks ago, and then the curator was complaining that they had an interview with one of the big actors, and CNN or BBC just focused on one side. And I said, well, shame on you, because this big artist comes to Ghana. Nobody in the Ghanaian media is given the chance to talk to this guy, and you allow a foreign media to interview the person. Of course they will twist the story. Do you get me? Fine. What we do may not get directly on the international media. I can go online. So if you said, let me get my best Ghanaian journalist to interview, I think this is Idris Elba.
Right.
Have a 50-minute sit down with Idris Elba. Wouldn't that be nice? But if you invite those who have this is the thing. If you want to build something, you want to use what's ready made, right? And yet you want to use what's ready made for media. So you bring BBC to interview Idris Elba. No problem. Why would somebody give you a chance with your movie? You need to lead by example to say, look, Idris Elba is big and bad, but so is Kojo Yankson, so is Bernard. When Barack Obama went to Kenya, my friend on the US program, who's a Kenyan journalist, was made to sit with her on Capital FM and had a 25-minute interview with Barack. She was barely 29 or 27 or whatever. Imagine what that means for young girls watching
Absolutely.
that. That's what we should do. But we want to put all our money on the big TV stations and turn around and say Ghanaian media is not doing what's internationally acceptable. You need to tell Idris or whoever comes that we have guys in this country who are really good. They may not be on CNN, but they will give you a good interview, and we can put it online for the world to watch. That's how you put Ghana on the map.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to do it for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's concerted effort,
Yes, yes.
I think my thing is, everyone should do their parts, so as you fight for this cause or this issue or this, I just say that this is one of the other areas that I'd really love to see more and more Ghanaian journalists and people in the media doing, being purposeful about it and not just kind of thinking it's okay to do what they do every day. It's taking it as a project and saying, no, I want to tell the story of Ghana, which is also the story of Africa, and bring it in a positive light to the global stage. So,
So
Cool.
those who are watching who are concerned about African stories should invest human and financial resources into building strong media brands. That's the way to go.
Yeah,
That's the way to
I
go.
agree.
Yeah.
So Bernard, earlier when we were talking about, some of the turning points in your life and how different values have shaped you, one of the areas you mentioned was personal tragedy. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about that, and how has this personal tragedy you mentioned shaped you even further? Has it changed you? Has it changed the way you think or
God.
feel or deal with people?
That's a big question. You change is very funny because you don't actually know when you're changing, but I suspect I'm changing, and I hope positively. We've never really grappled with death until it happens close to us.
Yeah.
And in my case, because I'm a public figure and it was so sudden, I had to sort of manage two things at the same time. There was a lot of publicity around this death, a lot of national grief, but there's also the need to protect your family and quickly switch into protective mode, right? And then get your network of friends and family to support. So I would say I learned a very important lesson, and which is funny because as a journalist, you think that I'll consume a lot of news.
Okay.
But I can tell you that 3 months into the tragedy, I hadn't read one newspaper. I hadn't gone online to read
You
anything
switched off.
because there was a lot of things being written. So I learned a very important lesson that my mind is my world and I have to protect it. So, and actually, I advised somebody recently who had a big problem that when you're going through a dark place, you need to be very deliberate what you feed your mind, because your attention, the focus of everything is for your mind. In fact, somebody says the battle of life is a battle for your mind, and it's a battle for the focus of your mind. So, very important lesson on knowing what to listen to, what to read. So, I had strong friends, family, who formed a wall around me to allow me to lead my family. And I think that's going well.
Okay.
That's number one. Tragedy makes you see everything becomes relative in importance. So there are things that used to wake you up and you're like, it doesn't really matter. And there are things that used to make you afraid and you're like, hell no, you can't kill me. You get me? So it makes you tougher in a way.
Yeah.
Because my point is, I'm here because I survived. All right. I think my wife was a much better person than I was. And if one of us should have gone, probably should have been me. But she left, right? So it makes you become more determined to make a difference. And it makes you fearless. So people like, aren't you afraid of the things I say? I'm like, look, what will not kill you just makes you stronger. So I'm able to get away with a lot of things. So fear dies. It moves you closer to God.
Okay.
Because, you know, no matter where you're from, when it comes to death, you need to think deeply about what happens after you're gone. I'm a Christian. I believe in life after here. Scripture says it's appointed to man once to die, and after that, judgment. So I'm like, you know, we're all on borrowed time. So you need to invest not just in the now, but in securing the tomorrow. Somebody said something to me. Isn't it better to believe in the afterlife and to die and say, well, there was no afterlife, than to say, well, I don't believe in the afterlife, and to die and realize, heck, I have so many things to do.
Yes.
So that's how I choose to go about it. So in terms of living, I live in the now, but I think about tomorrow a lot.
Okay.
And then there are all kinds of fears to conquer, because if you're a single parent with kids, there are lots of things you take for granted I won't take for granted. Right? You can just jump on a plane and go anywhere you want to go, because your child or your kids have another parent. But if you're the only one, you think a lot about what to do. So your sense of risk, you're very tempered. Then as a man with kids, I think women are more gifted and more intelligent than men, because they're able to multitask in extremely crazy ways. Prior to being a single parent, there were lots of things I glossed over. I'll just focus on one thing. But you can be brushing your tooth. Somebody said this in school, and then there's a phone call, and then you're having to whatever.
Literally, yeah.
So
5 things at the same time.
And I guess all those things were there, but they were not harnessed because I didn't have to do that. So, of course, there are other things to think about. You know, how to communicate with your kids. They need, and of course, there are other people around, my mom and other things. So there are things, but there's, you know, you can never replace a mother, right? So, and I'm pretty sure there are a few more reflections I need to do about this to be absolutely clear as to what the rest of the journey means.
But for now, it's a day at a time.
Yeah. But, and I'll say finally, it makes you, you know, it's funny, it makes you also very empathetic. Because you, like, if you, maybe I'm talking to somebody, I'm interviewing somebody for a job, the person wants to work with us, and the person asks the person, okay, so where do you live? Okay, I live with my uncle. What happened? Oh, I lost my dad when I was 3. So when he says that, I would have just said, oh, sorry, prior to this, but now I know what it means. So my respect for the person just jumps. I'm like, oh, wow. And you're here. You get it? Yeah. Now, you don't need to wait for this to happen to you to do this. But that's the way life works.
Life, yeah, that's how life is.
You know, somebody said something very interesting. He says, learn from experience, especially other people's.
Yes.
Because it says that there are many teachers, but life as a teacher is ruthless. So don't wait for life to teach you what others will teach you.
Exactly.
Because
it's
life
much
is
cheaper
life.
to
Life
learn
is in
from
a hurry,
others' experiences,
and life
yes.
has no time for your tears.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm seeing a lot of things in that. But look, I'm not sulking. I'm not bitter. I'm not hiding. I live my life out in the public. And
it was delightful to be with you recently on a panel at the Goddess CEO conference, the 10th anniversary, and you mentioned, the first thing you mentioned was that, your 5 kids are waiting for you at home. It's Saturday and you need to spend time with them, and I think that's
you know why
you're
though?
seizing every
Tucci, because
moment.
a lot of times when people introduce you, they talk about your good parts.
Yes.
Like Bernard is award-winning journalist, he's a great guy, and I think that's not.
It's not all.
Well,
that's not all there is
people,
to you.
So it's like, they sort of make you look like this great. The truth is that I'm also struggling. All right, and people need to know this. Otherwise, they'll think that it's just
glossy.
No, but that's not what it is. So, and that's how come we don't question our leaders, because we think they're perfect. So for me, I'm not afraid of my wounds. I'm not afraid of my wounds because that's the means to which God will bless other people. So I don't hide them. Jesus said, "These are my wounds." Right? He didn't put his hand in his pocket. He said, "Thomas, feel it," because that's where blessings come from.
Yeah.
So.
And I think, resilient, everything good comes from a bad place. Resilience brings strength, and you don't get that without having the knocks, that life.
You've made me say
brings.
much more than I really wanted to say.
Well, thank you for sharing with me.
I've said way too much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with me.
Very good journalist.
I told you, if you ever set up your company, you can hire me. No, I don't need to be the boss.
What you did there, because
I don't need to be the boss.
You've managed to very Larry King like.
So I'd be a good journalist, eh?
You are a great journalist.
Awesome. It was one of the professions I was interested in as a kid,
No wonder.
Journalism, law, and then marketing communication. So maybe one day
You've gotten me to say so much.
No, but I really enjoy talking to you, and I enjoy listening to you.
Yeah.
There aren't many people I enjoy listening to, and it sounds a bit not considerate, but I always enjoy listening to you, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Long may it continue.
Yes, amen, amen.
Yeah.
So what does the future hold? I mean, we've talked a lot about the work you're doing in media. Are there other areas that you've thought about venturing into, or do you want to continue to strengthen this area and to build it for yourself and also the wider industry?
I'm actually thinking about what next. It's funny because I've done media for 2 decades, 4 years as 2 decades, and I don't know. I'm growing. I do lots of things. By the way, I consult for companies informally.
Okay.
I do all kinds of things, but media is my first love professionally. So I'm wondering what next. There's a part of me. I've had lots of people who's asked me to go international, but there's a part of me that feels we need to build something. All right, because for me, it's not about me. Look at you. You had a great job globally. If it was just about you, you would have stayed. But you came back to build something, because for gifted people, there's a certain fulfillment in building something that outlives you beyond the paycheck. I suspect that's one of the reasons why I've stayed, because there's too many stories of he's a great presenter, he goes to the BBC, CNN, whatever, he does well for himself, and then when they come back to Ghana, they can't even have the kind of media that they'll be proud of. I think we should build something we can be proud of. Something that will say, wow, after 50 years, this is still running. And this is the 3rd generation of presenters doing a great job. So my focus is leadership development. So you notice a lot of the people I work with now, I'm deliberately leading them. And my boss tells me that people who work with me are doing pretty well.
Okay.
They're put in my circle. So as I said, this is like the 4th team I've worked with. I started a breakfast show. First few years I did alone. Then I had one team. Some are doing their PhD, some are married and left. This is like the 4th iteration of the show, and these guys are all growing. There are people who now can sit in for me. Of course, I'm different, but they sit in and the show doesn't collapse. They're doing very well. There are people who've come to work with me who are hosting shows elsewhere, who work in other places. So one way of solidifying the legacy is not just the building or the media house. It's the people and the principles.
And when we started, you actually said for you, leadership is about the development of people,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
And if you had to share any other leadership philosophy, what would it be?
Okay, so to people like you and I, because of the privilege we've had, read, listened to people and learned from life, one of the biggest pains is finding the right people to pour into what you know, right? Because it's painful to have knowledge that you can't translate or expertise that you can't replicate, all right? We teach what we know, we reproduce what we are. So I want reproduction. So I have Caleb Kuda, I have Jude Duncan, I have the team that works with me, Susu Graham. These guys, you should know that these guys have been with Bernard. You should know just by associating with them. So I like that because that tells me that I can be irrelevant. I can leave media knowing that there's not going to be a vacuum.
A void, yeah.
Right. So it's, for me, a very important thing because not only do we need people to replace me, we also need media houses to stand and be profitable and also socially responsible without me necessarily running them. And they can grow bigger. So leadership development is very key. So deliberate mentoring. We do a lot of training now. So we find money to do projects where we train student journalists.
Okay.
Because I feel like for me, to change a nation, you need to change the way the nation thinks. You can do that at home, at the dinner table. You can do that in the classroom. You can do that at church, in the mosque. But you can also do that on air. So my role is, if that in those 2 hours that they're listening to me on their way to school, I add to the good things they hear at home and I prepare them for what they hear in school by letting them know that it's about Ghana, that it's not about making money and leaving. Even if you left, it's about building here. So I'm very clear in my mind that the media is my part in the national equation. So I may leave broadcasting, but I will not leave media. Because media is the tool for shaping minds. So you don't have to be on air to use the media. So I guess you help me.
I fully align with that. And I'm so happy to hear it because for me, communication is everything. Everything starts from what you hear, what you're exposed to. People don't understand the impact that media can have, positively, negatively. It can change the way, like you said, everything. It's about the way we think. The way we think determines how we act. And, information that we hear transforms the way we think and so on. So for me, the media is one of the most powerful institutions or tools to change.
Thank you for saying
nation.
that.
So,
You know why? Because most people say to me, why don't you go into politics? Or why don't you... It's almost like they feel there's a bigger leadership opportunity. And I say to them, look, how many people of my age have the privilege I have to change minds? All right? People conceptualize leadership as having a position. Leadership is having a platform to make change. And also making what is impossible today possible tomorrow. And I think media is a great platform to do this.
100%.
So for me, it's a big leadership responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. My appreciation of its power is just what you just said. I wish more people would understand it that way. And I say this to a lot of journalists, that if you knew the power you had, you wouldn't just cede it to the next available politician.
Exactly.
You would read, you would research, and you will strive to make what you put on air factual, impactful, and sensible. If you knew the power you had. So I guess you know what you know the power of media. You do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know. You do.
So would you like to leave any words with anyone who might be considering entering media?
Yes.
What should they think about?
Yes.
A lot of people hear or find that it's not rewarding to work in media, but there's the other side, and we've talked about that impact that one can make. And in fact, at the end of the day, that is what's rewarding, because one day we're all going to go, but what did you leave behind? What were you able to do? And I think when people know that they can really contribute to positive change, it's something. But a lot of people still aspire to work in media. What would you advise them?
Look, excellence is very important. You need to learn, and you need to strive to be the best. Excellent journalism. Now, I would always say, I'd rather have an excellent plumber than an incompetent philosopher. So it's not about what you do, it's about how you do it.
Yeah.
All right. I heard something very funny recently. There's a quote that says, the country that tolerates bad philosophy because it's a high profession and doesn't reward good plumbing because it's a low profession will have neither good plumbing or good philosophy because none of his theories can hold water. Right? So for me, people don't respect journalism in Ghana. Respect yourself by being excellent. If you respect yourself, you research, you read, you maintain independence from those you cover. You will subject yourself to the discipline of verification, because journalism is a discipline of verification. It's not a platform for reproducing information. So we don't forward everything. What distinguishes us from every other profession is that we verify. So the struggle and the pain of a journalist is to verify what you put out. Number two, your first obligation is to the truth. Your first obligation. And your loyalty is to citizens, not to the state or to politicians. And as I say, you must strive to make the significant interesting. That means that you must learn the art of storytelling, work on your craft, learn from best practice, maintain an independence from who you cover. So there must be an ethical thing, because a bad man cannot be a good journalist. You know, you need to be a good person. You need to understand that there are boundaries. So your relationship with politicians, business people has to be well defined, because if you are going to be effective in your storytelling,
you cannot be compromised.
Very important. So they have to understand that it's not a path to wealth, but anything you do and do well, you get honor. And also, it's about Ghana, because in Africa, we are not here to just make money for ourselves. We are here to build a nation. So they must understand the need to be Afrocentric for those listening to this podcast, because this is our time, and we need people of courage to stand up and say, we will tell the African story, but we'll tell it excellently. We're not going to beg for a foot at the table or for crumbs. Our music is great. Everybody now wants a bit of Africa. Our journalism has to be great. And for the young guys listening, work on yourself, prepare, because even if you get a minute on the international stage, if you kill it, you will gain the respect. So don't complain about lack of opportunity. Spend your days in obscurity working on your craft, and you will make a difference.
Thank you so much.